Two guys driving across the country in a car coming to you from day 2. Stephen and I are in Iowa.
Yes, welcome to the great state of Iowa. It's not actually that great.
We have a major problem thus far with Iowa, which is that they have speed cameras.
Supposedly. We've seen one. We don't know if the rest of them are all hidden, and maybe we'll all go to jail after this.
We understand they've contracted a Swedish company to build these, which makes me think that they probably work.
If they do exist, supposedly. Allegedly.
I sort of wish that they had contracted some folks out of Iowa to build them. However, I'm joking, but probably the Iowa University folks would have figured something good out as well.
I think the people at Iowa University, they seem somewhat astute based on their dark institutional housing. I don't think they have anything better to do than to think of ways to catch people speeding on I-80.
I really enjoyed Iowa City, actually, and the university. Really cute town. Gluten-free food options. We received a parking ticket for not paying the meter, which was just, really dumb on my part. But it's such a friendly town that it's zero cost for the first ticket, just a warning. So that was nice. And we walked around town, looked at some of the old buildings. Actually, the original Iowa Capitol was established in 1846, which seems like yesterday in the big scheme of history. And saw some cool cars, right, Stephen?
Yeah, we saw a nice old International Scout 2 that had a very small steering wheel, which you disagreed with.
Yeah, in my mind, the whole steering wheel thing on these big, old
trucks.
Vintage trucks, exactly, it's sort of counterintuitive. They maybe don't have power steering and probably would have heavy steering, so therefore you would think you would want a large steering wheel to have some leverage to move the wheel. However,
well, I think with a small steering wheel you could get maybe better steering angle, smaller inputs for full circle, to turn around. I had a tiny steering wheel on the 996. It has power steering, but I can see what you mean. If you're just lugging around town, on a big truck, old truck like that, it's charming to have a big steering wheel, kind of like the diesel, the W123. So, but maybe the way that they drive it is a little bit different, and a smaller steering wheel suits that.
Yeah, I completely disagree with Steven. I think the small steering wheel is bullshit, and you need the big steering wheel like the W123 to enjoy that loafing around experience. What do you think they're doing, Steven? They're bogging that thing in the mud?
Didn't quite look like it, but there are quite a few rolling farms around here. There is some off-roading to be done.
Get a little mud on the tires.
As your good old favorite musician would say, Tyler Childers.
He's not the mud on the tires guy, but
no.
Very close.
He's the mud on the tires guy.
To be honest, I don't exactly remember.
I think it's Tyler Childers.
I'm 100% positive it's not Tyler Childers. So, day 2 of the trip, yesterday we came from New Jersey all the way out to Chicago. It was actually a pretty smooth sailing. We had some great corners in the beginning in Pennsylvania. I was on, oh wow, the speed cameras are here, supposedly. No, that says Gegenstand, Stephen.
I don't speak German.
Tires watch in the that. Road. Yeah, that's what it meant. Gegenstand means something in the road. Good. I'm really glad we didn't hit those fucking tires with this car.
So many shredded tires on this journey so far. I don't know why they don't clean up the highways a little bit better.
I think that the rate in which the trucks are shredding the tires is above and beyond that with which they could clean it up. Yeah. But we had great corners on Route 80 in Pennsylvania. I don't think I've ever had a better drive out Route 80 through Pennsylvania. I was taking conference calls at $1.30 and just, rolling through some of these big hills. It was a ton of fun. And Stephen got his first taste of the Cayman GTS 4.0 on a road trip. What do you think, after day 1, Stephen?
I think the car is, you'd think it's a little bit too small maybe for 2 guys to go on a cross-country road trip. Maybe a 911 would be better suited. But We actually fit our luggage in there, our duffel bags and things, pretty easily. Everything kind of fit nicely, like Tetris. And it's nice that we have some stuff in the back and it to be covered. If you had a 911, you have the extra seats, but it's all exposed. So it's nice that we got some things hidden, either in the front and very minimal stuff in the car.
The hatchback concept of this Cayman is shockingly practical. It's not quite as big of storage as I had in the Camaro, which is, I guess a competing car, but it is pretty spacious for such a small vehicle. But I think the folks are more interested in how the car drives, Stephen.
Well, it's been a great car to cruise around the country. I think I applaud you for the suspension, comfort suspension, the extra 10 millimeters. I think that probably makes a big difference on this type of journey. And I certainly don't think we could do this in my 996 with the coilovers. I think our backs would be shattered, but the seats are very comfortable with the Alcantara, and the suspension has been supple. It's nice we could turn it on and off in terms of sport. So we could be in sport mode without a sport suspension if the highway gets a little rough. Car's flipping fast. We've been pretty much, when it's open traffic, doing 100 to 130.
We've maybe in Mexico eked up to 150 once or twice,
Nice.
but in general, I'd say the speeds have been between 90 and 130, generally speaking. I agree the suspension's been quite comfortable, and the thing that impresses me the most is that we're sitting in this sports car for so long, doing so many miles, and we're not getting out feeling like, a bucket of bolts. In fact, I had that shitty Audi Q3, and I can tell you that would have been a substantially worse road trip car than this. I got out of that feeling extremely fatigued comparatively.
Yeah, I'm a little focused here, so
Continue driving.
Nothing from Steven. So we went through Pennsylvania, lots of great corners. It was a lot of fun to lean this car into corners at higher speeds, and you're obviously not on the limit of its performance on the roads, even when you're going very fast on these big sweeping corners, but a lot of them had some gradient to them, a little bit of elevation change, and so really getting on the gas and powering out through the exit is just quite a rewarding feeling. I've noticed that we both tend to be shifting the car a lot, even though you could just do this entire drive in sixth and have plenty of power for passing. We seem to get excited about revving the thing up.
yeah, it likes to be revved out, and I feel like there's so much power in the middle of the rev range that it's nice to explore it all and use it all to its fullest potential. And certainly it gets you past cars a little bit quicker if you're trying to make a statement to get out of my way.
We generally haven't been up around Redline. I know there's so many cars that are faster than this out there today, but you really don't need to use all of what this engine has to move very, very fast on wide open interstates. So I think in summary, we could say that this car is devouring the open road, maybe more so than I expected. This has been a more comfortable road trip till now than I've expected, and we're covering ground at my fastest rate of cross-country travel thus far.
And you've crossed the country quite a few times in many different cars. You were talking a little bit about your journey in the Camaro.
Yeah, I guess I've done a lot of this drive 4 or 5 times. First time was in an Audi Allroad, second time in the W126 300 SEL, third time in my E46 that I purchased in Lincoln, Nebraska, fourth time in, what came after that? Oh, the Audi S8 that I bought in Detroit. D2, fifth time in the Camaro purchased in Detroit. And the Camaro was an exceptional road trip car. I think maybe the Porsche is better insulated from a sound perspective, and it probably is more solid and less floaty. But the Camaro had a little bit of a softness to it. It felt it did remind me of an old school, what could be liked about an old school American car. And it has this 6-gear overdrive where at 85 or 90 even, you're not spinning barely 2,000 RPMs. So the engine was just so undertaxed. It led to a relaxing sensation. In the Porsche, we're most of the time up at around 4,000 RPMs at the speeds that we're doing. 6th gear is pretty strung out, and the car doesn't mind sitting at that RPM at all, but certainly there's a bit more engine noise in the cabin, and also it's like right at our shoulder.
Yeah, no, I can see what you mean. You were gushing about, other Chevys that you've driven, regular old Chevys, and how comfortable and capable they are. So I could see the Camaro being a little bit of that, but with extra power. And yeah, the engine's right here. You're much more engaged and attached to the road, I feel like, in this car, especially the GTS 4.0. I think we were also commenting about what would this journey be like in just a regular Cayman with a 4-cylinder. How would it be any different? And what were your thoughts on that?
I actually think that maybe it would be pretty quiet with the 4-cylinder.
I think so too.
Having a turbo to suck up that noise, it makes me kind of want to drive one of the 4-cylinders on a highway drive. I bet it's very quiet in comparison to this motor, because think about how much less space it takes up. It's 2 liters versus are they both 2.5 or no? The base is 2 liters, right?
Yeah, I think it's both 2 liters.
I feel like one's 2.5. We'll have to do some fact checking on this. But yeah, I bet there's even additional sound insulation in there, or room for it, because it's such that 4.0 must take up all of the space in that compartment.
Yeah, no, it's, you're saying the engine's small and there's room left over, or not so much?
In the 4-cylinder cars, there's, like twice as much room as you've got in this engine compartment.
This engine is stuffed in here.
It's interesting now that I think about it, though. Demand Motorsports, like Matt Farah's car, they do a 4.5 liter kit where they bore out your 4 liter. Jesus Christ, Steven. Oh, it's very unpleasant what I'm going through right now.
That's perfect. Wasn't any vegan move.
Unpleasant nonetheless. Steven's getting a little bit tired of driving in traffic. I can tell he's looking for some more open roads. So
Hey, if you see a gap, you go for it. It's race car protocol.
Yeah, he likes to live by the rule: drive fast, take chances. I'm a little older than him, so I'm being a little more conservative now.
You're an old country boy now.
Indeed. What else about yesterday is worth commenting? We rolled into Chicago. It was beautiful. Beach, deep dish pizza, a little bit disappointing. New York pizza is for sure the number one in the country, without a doubt.
Maybe Connecticut,
I don't know. It's definitely New York.
That's fair. They're similar. Some really good pizza in New York. We had a great one in Brooklyn before we left there. And yeah, it was outstanding. You've had 3 pizzas now in the last 3 days.
Yeah,
2 days.
Brooklyn pizza, Bleecker Street pizza, and Chicago deep dish pizza. I'm gonna need some greens tonight.
Yeah, definitely. We never got our green smoothie as we wanted.
I did eat an avocado toast. We decided to stop today coming out of Chicago and Iowa City because always need to see like a little college town. Got a lot of character versus maybe some other just general Midwest towns, and it didn't disappoint. And so now we're trying to get as far as we can through Nebraska today, because we're thinking that this Iowa part of the trip in Nebraska is going to be maybe some of the most homogeneous in terms of the aesthetics. And I'm quite eager to get to the Denver area, drive through Route 70 through all the mountains, and go into Utah towards Moab and so forth, and maybe stop in Arches or a few of the national parks. I think Steven has maybe been to some of these.
Yeah, I've been through Zion and stuff on family trips, but we weren't driving anything interesting, and it's such a pretty area, so always happy to see it, although we're not going to South Dakota.
Yeah, I if it weren't for Iowa City and that great time we had, I sort of would have regretted not going to South Dakota. I hear the Badlands are great. So I think the next time I did this cross-country trip, I would do the northern route again. I'd go, watch this guy. I'd go to South Dakota, try to go to the Badlands National Park, and then maybe I'd maybe go to Mount Rushmore, just to check it off, and then go the northern route through Salt Lake City and stop in Lake Tahoe and all that, and do the Bonneville Salt Flats. It'd be a lot of fun.
You can count me in for that one.
What car are we going to do it in?
I don't know. I might have to buy another Porsche or maybe a W123. I don't think that'd be a good car for that.
I am definitely not doing this trip in a W123. It's going to, actually, to tell you the truth, it would be really hard to do this trip in another car after doing it in this. This is setting a very high benchmark. I sort of think what we should buy is like a Bentley or a Range Rover. I think that would be a really interesting, car to try this in.
Yeah, I think a Bentley would be super cool to cruise around, but still have a lot of power to get you to go where you want to go and get you there quicker.
I've been actually very curious about buying a Bentley recently. It's sort of been on my list of cars that I'd like to buy. Spend 40 grand on a 2010s Bentley that's depreciated by $160,000. What do you think?
Well, you seem to be on the old British kick. You want an older Range Rover for 10K, and you seem to justify if you have to spend another 10K in it if something goes wrong, because at 20K it's still a lot of car for the money, so I think a Bentley's up your alley for that.
Yeah, the Bentley I suspect will be less of a value proposition than that nice L322 Range Rover, but certainly something I would like to try at some point in time. We did see a very interesting Rolls Royce on our ride out. We saw
Is that Ohio? Was that in Ohio?
It was in Ohio, and it was actually it almost looked like a boat tail, right?
It did. I mean, I think Rolls-Royce is very influenced by boats and things like that, and people seem to be having a joyous drive across Ohio in that. I don't know if I would want to do something that big and disconnected from the road, because I feel like that would be a little boring, especially on these straight highways, just cruising in that. It would be comfortable, but maybe a little bit boring. You need some theater.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I would guess the theater would be how fast you could go. Near miss?
Nah, but just making sure.
Got a nice Pennsylvania Camaro next to us. We were cruising in Iowa with a Camaro ZL1 convertible. Wow, that's a massive Chevrolet dealer. My goodness. Everything's big out here. Like, you get off the highways and you kind of expect to be dumped right into the town, but there's so much room that the interstates are built like 5+ miles outside of the town, so you just drive on these roads with nothing to get into the towns from the interstate, and you're surprised that you roll up on cities.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of land here, so if you're gonna make it big.
Bigger is better in Iowa. They did have a Trump God and Country sign from 2022 still up in one of the fields, which was
2020.
2020 still up in one of the fields, which was interesting. We learned another, back on the car subject, we learned an interesting tidbit about Steven today. He doesn't like Japanese cars. What do you have to say about this, Steven?
I just, my only experience with Japanese cars growing up was the Land Cruisers, was Toyota, and I love those trucks, and I think we talked about this once. I never grew up playing Gran Turismo. I didn't have a Sony, and you think that's a big aspect of why I'm not into the whole JDM scene.
It's a good point. I'm reading a great book right now called, I don't remember the name of it exactly. It's about the story of the GTR by Ryan Zamalan, and talking about how Japanese culture was around the formation of the GTR, some of the people involved in the project, what people thought about it in Japanese society, and as well as in the company, what it meant to Nissan. And he reflected on the fact that the GTR became very much a halo car for a lot of us in the US from stuff like Gran Turismo, from some of the the manga, cartoon stuff as well. Like interesting bits of Japanese culture that filtered into the U.S. sort of right around the time when our generation were kids. I would be careful here. I don't know what the fuck's gonna go on. Maybe just wait and let this guy go. Steven's thinking about undertaking an 18-wheeler with 4 huge fucking pipes on it as we're getting onto the highway. And I just feel that a more conservative approach might be merited.
No.
Thanks for waiting. No, that was, at least you waited to see what was coming of the road versus just taking chances. But you just Jersey slid right onto the highway. So the reason I say that Steven doesn't like Japanese cars, though, is because we reflected today that he drove a really nice stock Toyota Supra right-hand drive. I guess it's the 4th generation Supra, if I'm not mistaken, with a stick in a film for Rami Fagnani over Inbound Motorsports and what's the other company they work with? The Cultivated Collector. And he never really even told us much about this experience. This is a car and an opportunity that Ross and I would have been talking about forever. And Steven's like, yeah, I drove a Supra. And I asked him about it today, and he still didn't have shit to say about it. So think about it, Steven. What if you want to reflect on that experience? Give us some details about the Supra, like in depth. What was it like to drive? What were some parts of its character that stood out to you? Did it have a particular shift feel? What were the pedals like? Clutch engagement, steering? Anything that was tactile or interesting? Did it have a lot of power? Did it give you a big shove when the turbos kicked in? A lot of lag?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's not a lot that stands out about it. I think it was very, it was an original stock. I think it was, a little higher on the mileage side, but very clean. Actually, I think it was like 150 kilometers on the clock, 150,000, which is not so much for that car. But, the pedals, everything was super simple, laid out, very Japanese, so everything kind of made sense, no frills. The car is, I would say, slower than you would expect as in stock form. The turbos do give you a bit of boost, but I wouldn't say you're being slammed in the back of the seat kind of a thing.
I think it only has 296 horsepower stock. They had some program where all the Japanese car makers agreed to have 296 horsepower cars. So they said, like the GTR, for example, that was bullshit and had a lot more, but maybe the Supra only had around 300 horsepower stock.
Honestly, a lot of those Japanese cars from that generation, stock, they weren't tremendously fast, but they were such a great platform to tune and could put in more horsepower and more power. So I think that's why a lot of people
speculates the guy who doesn't like and knows nothing about Japanese cars.
But it seems to make sense. I mean, you just mentioned that cap about the 290 horsepower. It seems pretty limiting from a sports car, and I can see the Japanese culture, they agree to that. But people get their hands on it, they want to do what they want with it, and so and I think it's a great platform to do that. The car was actually very comfortable. Originally, the Supra is kind of a Grand Tourer car, and I think it serves that purpose very well in stock form. It's just that most people don't see it as a Grand Tourer, and in that lens, it's kind of a dog when you think about it in the grand scheme of what people have done with it and what it's known culturally for.
Question on the Grand Tourer aspect. Is it, you sit in that car and you ride in it, does it feel softer and more supple than something like this? Is it more of a, I don't know, like sort of a Mercedes SL kind of vibe?
I mean, I'm a German car guy. I wouldn't say it's up to the same quality and standard of the German, comfortable saloons, but I would say it's more supple and more comfortable than this, and quieter. Actually, you really only hear some like induction noise and some of the turbo noise, not much exhaust, noise from the stock pipes. And yeah, the seats are very comfortable. I could do cross country in a stock Supra. I think that would be a great car to drive cross country.
That would be a cool story. I'd love to do something like that. A right-hand drive Supra across the country.
I think
we were talking today about doing a rally with Stephen and Ross and doing a cross-country trip, and I think that doing one in right-hand drive JDM cars would be an excellent story for us to embark on.
So we were just talking about, like, if we were to go to South Dakota, what car would we bring? I think we just answered our own question.
So we'd take a Supra. The problem is they cost too much money now, Steven. We need a Supra, I guess a Skyline, and what would be the third one?
A Mitsubishi. We've been seeing so many Mitsubishis around here. Maybe get an Eclipse, or not an Eclipse, or like, Lancer.
I'm not sure about that. I feel like that's more of it's a little bit racier in a way, you know what I mean? It feels a little less GT car. I have to put a little thought into this. I bet Ross has a shitload of Japanese cars on the back of his head that he would suggest. He'll like this concept.
Maybe a 300 ZX or something, a Nissan.
I actually think you're right. Oh, that's a great point. Maybe the Supra and that car are better cars to compare, and I feel like the 300 ZX was always thought of as more of a GT car.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy car, I think, and not necessarily like super fast by stock standards, but again, a great platform to throw a lot of power into.
Did you have the chance to, rev it out and really feel all the power that it had? Did it like getting revved out? Was it happy with just mid-range stuff? What was the character of that engine?
Yeah, I got to rev it out quite a bit. I had to be careful because, this was a car that was about to go on auction, so I had to take good care of it. But yeah, it did like to be revved out, and I would say when you really got into the top end, you felt the boost come in, and it really started getting going. So you really, to keep it up to speed and keep it on its toes, you have to keep it high in the rev range and in the boost at all times. Low end, it's a little bit of a dog, so you want to keep it keep it going, keep the revs up.
What's the turbo kick-in point? Is it like 3,000 RPMs or a little higher?
I think it was more around 4,000.
I can sort of picture that gauge cluster, and I feel like 4 is like straight up and down, and maybe that makes a little sense.
Yeah, the gauge cluster was really cool. All like ambient green lighting, not too in your face. A lot of buttons in the center console. Everything is pointed towards the driver, very driver focused, similar to like modern day Corvettes now and things like that, but in a better way, for sure.
Otherwise, about the Supra, what'd you think about the shifting? How did it handle? Anything else that you thought was remarkable?
I think the shift action was smooth, very easy. Not super tight. I don't know if that's a function of it needing new bushings or anything, but it wasn't sloppy by any means. But nice long throws. Yeah, easy, pretty light clutch, but communicative. And yeah, honestly, it's once you get into it, even though it's right-hand drive, you get pretty comfortable driving it. I would say by the end of the night, I felt very comfortable in it, and I did enjoy it. I don't know if it's a car I would buy. Certainly a cool car, and a lot of people look at it as an icon, but to drive a stock one, you're almost disappointing people because everyone expects you to like two-step and just rev it out and blow fire out of the exhaust and be a drift car kind of thing. But but I like it in the stock form. And so I would, if I had one, I would keep it towards that degree.
Your review of it is definitely making me interested in driving a stock one and sort of understand what Japan was going for and Toyota was going for in that car. And it sounds like maybe to be more of a competitor for the European cars, give a little bit more of that character. So, we're going into detail about cars and giving some reviews. Tell us in some more detail some of the characteristics of this Cayman and maybe how it compares to the other modern Porsches that you have experience with. So what do you think of this 4.0 engine versus the 2-liter flat 4 that you had in your dad's 718?
I mean, this is just way smoother and more linear across the power band. Certainly in the 718, you feel the boost come in, and it's fun. And I do enjoy it. It's a different experience. I think a lot of people, talk poorly about the 4-cylinder. I don't think it's as bad as people say. Yes, the sound can be a little dull, Especially if you try a sport exhaust and you're driving around town, it just doesn't sound good. This car sounds fantastic. We were commenting, we thought initially this car might be too much and our ears might be tired by the end of it, but I really don't think so. This car is certainly loud and it sounds good, but it's not in your face when you're in the cabin. You certainly hear the noise, but I wouldn't call it droney. My 996 is a bit droney, but it has no mufflers on it, and the suspension on this is fantastic. Our bones are intact, and like you said before, we're not feeling like a bag of bolts or bucket of bolts at the end of the day, and we've been able to just demolish miles in it comfortably.
What do you think of the shifter and clutch action versus, say, your 996? Do you think that Porsche's come a long way? You think things are pretty similar overall in character? I'll reserve my judgment till after you are able to tell your side of the story.
Well, I think the comparing a stock kind of regular 911 to regular, Cayman. I did drive one base Cayman, 718 Cayman. My dad's 718 was a PDK, but and then my 996, when it did have the stock assembly and everything in it, I feel like they're very similar, but more refined and a little bit tighter, but very smooth. I think it's very easy and nice shift action. When it comes to the GT models, I think that's where it gets a little bit of a step up. And right now I have a numeric shift assembly in my 996, and that's very mechanical, very tight, very notchy, and it actually takes a lot of effort. And it's much shorter than it used to be. And I do enjoy it, and it is very satisfying to do that and to get into gear. And this one is, somewhat of that, but a little bit more user-friendly. And I would say compared to the GTS models of the 911, like my dad's 991.2 GTS, this is a little bit more forgiving on regular roads, I would say, driving around town, things like that. We've been talking a lot about how the car interacts, how all the parts kind of work smoothly, even when you're high in the rev range. And I think that's a function of tighter bushings and everything being better bolted in. And you're comparing it to BMWs, where at a higher rev range, everything's a little bit out of sorts, and so it's not as enjoyable of an experience shifting gears. So I think that's something that Porsche does very well, and I think this is a good in-between between those things.
Yeah, it's that characteristics is very Porsche to me. I mean, I think that's constant in your 996 and my dad's old Boxster that I drove. I'm sure in your dad's 911. They all seem to love to perform at redline and could be there all day, and the shift action is super smooth, and you don't battle to push these cars and use all of the power. I actually don't know all the engineering details on this, but I believe even the 996 had variable engine and transmission modes. And I think it's specifically for that reason. So they're able to really tense things up as you get going, and leads to that Porsche characteristic of high precision. I've battled a little bit more with this car around town. It's almost like it's a little clunkier, or you have to work a little harder to drive it slowly. And in the end, it is very luxurious, and you can do it really well. But I've had to learn it. But shifting at redline, it's almost like instantaneously perfect. I can't think of another car that I've driven that's easier to rev out to redline. And I love blipping my own downshifts, but this auto blipper is fantastic. I mean, it just nails it every time. They're so perfect, so smooth, and honestly, when you're on a long trip, or you're tired, or you're in traffic, it's really nice to stick that on and just have perfect shifts each time.
We're going through toll booths, which there seem to be a lot of here for no reason.
Yeah, tolls. It's an interesting question. I don't really understand that. It's something we'll have to understand the economics of a little more. We were debating that really the folks who should be tolled are those who are out of state, but if you live locally, it should just be a part of your taxes. I'm not really sure what the deal is there. When I reflect on it, I believe that in legislature, they have a harder time passing tax increases than they do implementing tolls on highways. It's just an easier sell. It's not really here for a logical reason, just because it's easier to get done. Well, anyway, I think we got a lot more ahead of us, more to come, but it's been an exciting trip so far, and I'm loving my car. I think the more the miles go on, I'm just really happy to have this thing. And it's interesting that, you would think maybe you get sick of a sports car like this over a long trip, but I'm sort of falling for it more and more.
Yeah, I think the car has been, it's a fantastic car, and I think the way you have it set up makes it even a better suited car for this kind of thing. I think maybe if you didn't have the extra 10 millimeter lift, maybe it would be a little harsher on this journey. So it's been a great grand tour and a country bomber, cruiser to get across the country. And we've made great time, and the roads have been good, and we're making good progress, and decided to get to Colorado and get across Nebraska.
We'll report back in tomorrow. Hopefully by then we're in Colorado and we're looking at some beautiful mountains. But for now, that's it from the Autoholics.